the EU and the US versus the tech industry, careers in business and technology consulting, and keys to implementation success. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 177 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling. This is episode 177. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com, and you can also find all the past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of transformation. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, and this show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So thank you for being here today. We've got a great show for you today lined up. We've got a couple of guests coming up here. We're going to have a couple of guests. We're going to have Rob Novick, who's a veteran consultant. He's actually a mentor of mine. He's someone I used to work for, and now he advises us here at Third Stage Consulting. He's going to be on the show here talking about careers in business and technology consulting. So we're going to really unpack the field of consulting and unpack the whole concept of what it takes to be successful in consulting and how to be effective as a consultant, how to manage your career. We're going to cover all that good stuff. So if you are in consulting or have an interest in potentially someday becoming a consultant, I highly recommend you stick around for that. And then later in the show, we're going to have Jeff Nelson from the Third Stage Consulting team. He's going to be on the show talking about keys to implementation success. And actually in that interview, it's actually an interview that's going to be released soon on a new podcast series we're launching called Journey to D365. And it's a podcast that's focused on people that are helping or going through Microsoft Dynamics 365 implementations. But the reason we're going to play you that interview on this show is sort of a preview or a pre-launch of that new podcast series is because the stuff that Jeff and I talk about in that interview is extremely relevant to any sort of ERP implementation, whether it's Microsoft D365 or any other sort of ERP implementation for that matter. So we're going to play you that interview just to kind of learn from some of the lessons that he's had in his experience in helping clients through their ERP implementation. So stick around for that. And then we're actually going to start the show though with some audience questions from social media, as well as some newsworthy topics, including some of the lawsuits that are happening in the global world today. One is Microsoft, who's getting sued by the European Union, and then Adobe is getting sued by the U.S. government. So we're going to talk about the kind of the global government crackdown on the tech space and what the implications are for digital transformations going forward. So be sure to stick around for that. But before we get to those newsworthy topics and our guest on the show today, I want to cover a couple of questions that have come up here recently on social media and unpack these a bit. So the first one is this. It says, because it's supposed to handle all the modules without any breakdowns, but this is not a fact. We must embrace effective communication with transparency to update the stakeholders on every movement of the project. So I think this is alluding to the fact that oftentimes organizations and employees within organizations have super high expectations for what a digital transformation or an ERP project is going to deliver to them. So the expectation is, hey, this is going to fix all of our problems. It's going to give us all the modules we need, all the functionality and capabilities we need to make our lives easier and to make our lives better and to make the organization better. And while that may be true to a large degree, that yes, it will make your life easier. It'll make organizations' jobs easier and employees' jobs easier. There's still deficiencies and gaps and imperfections in the way that software is implemented. So I think it's really important that organizations focus not only on the positive, but also understand where the weaknesses are and what the deficiencies are in the solution that they're implementing. I think a lot of times what happens, one of the dynamics we see a lot with our clients is that when you've gotten to that point in a project where you've recognized the need for new technology, you've gone out and you've evaluated and helped select new technologies, and we help our clients evaluate and select technology all the time. It's one of the key things that we do to help our clients. And at that point where you've chosen the technology and you've gotten board approval or management approval to move forward with a digital transformation or an ERP implementation, oftentimes what happens is organizations are so excited, morale's at an all-time high, momentum's at an all-time high, and they tend to focus only on the positive things, all the great stuff that's going to come out of that technology. And they end up overlooking the risks and the downsides and the pitfalls of what's going to happen or what could happen during the implementation. And the problem here is you don't want to kill the momentum. You don't want to kill the excitement for the project, but you do want to have a realistic view of what we're about to begin. Let's have a realistic view of this journey we're about to begin. And a lot of times it's sort of like a road trip. Imagine if you're a parent and you've ever taken your kids on a road trip, whether it's a few hours or maybe it's days you spent in the car, you're driving across the country or, to multiple countries, whatever the case may be. And you're very excited when you take off. Everyone's, excited and ready to go. And then you realize, wow, this is a long drive. We're getting tired. We're hungry. We need to stop to eat, but there's nowhere good to eat around here. So we've got to keep driving until we find a good place to eat. Maybe you run out of gas. I don't know. There's a lot of things that could happen in a road trip. And, it's not that you want to kill the excitement for the road trip with your kids by telling them all the things that are going to not be fun about the trip, but you do need to have a realistic understanding that, hey, instead of planning for a 6-hour road trip, which would be if there's no traffic, there's no problems along the way, maybe we plan for 8 or 10 hours. So we've got a little extra buffer in there. And we know that we're going to have to make stops along the way. We're going to have to maybe run into bad traffic. Maybe we're going to have to stop and eat. Maybe someone's not going to feel well. Someone in the family may not feel well. So we're going to have to stop. If you understand that those things might happen and you sort of plan for it, it doesn't mean you lose the excitement behind the road trip, but you can still plan ahead and not be surprised when that stuff happens, because inevitably, just like on a road trip, stuff happens. There's something that you don't know that is not going to be expected potentially, and it's not going to be as fun as the rest of the trip. And the same thing is true for digital transformation. I think it's really important to be transparent and be self-aware of what some of the challenges are, what some of the cultural nuances are, what some of the potential pitfalls are that you're going to face as an organization. So it's a great comment, and I totally agree that you want to be transparent around the risks of a digital transformation, and that all begins with you. First of all, you as a project team and as a leadership team first, fully understanding what those deficiencies and risks are. Here's another comment here, and this is in regard to a post that I posted, I think it was on LinkedIn, where I talk about some of the hoaxes in the digital transformation and enterprise technology space. And when I say hoax, it's meant to be a triggering, overly strong word to create a reaction for people, because there are, in my opinion, hoaxes in the industry or misleading statements that are often made by the industry that can lead to problems later because of unrealistic expectations. And so this was in response to one of my posts about some of I think it was the top 10 hoaxes in the ERP software space. And if you want to see the post I'm talking about, just be sure to follow me on LinkedIn. Go to my LinkedIn post and you'll see it's a whiteboard post where it's actually an output from a YouTube video where I whiteboarded what some of these 10 hoaxes are. And then I took a picture of that whiteboard and I published it on LinkedIn. But the comment here is: the sad truth that hoaxes rely on people being gullible and or lazy. That senior execs seemingly swallow everything they're told by ERP vendors, insisting on a cloud SaaS beggar's belief. So I think, this is interesting. It's a strong statement to say that people are gullible and or lazy. Execs believe everything they hear from software vendors. I'm not sure that it's gullible or lazy. I mean, maybe it is. I'm not completely disagreeing, but I think probably, in my opinion, the bigger issue is not gullibility or laziness. It's more as humans hearing what you want to hear. When you hear that a SaaS or a cloud solution is going to give you everything you need, it's out of the box, you don't have to worry about technology, you don't have to worry about infrastructure, you don't have to worry about upgrades because the vendor's handling all that for you. It sounds good like that. And it's true. Those things are true. But the problem is there's also a dark side to that. There's also the fact that, okay, yes, someone else is managing upgrades for you. Yes, it's a SaaS solution. It's scalable. It's easier to deploy from a technology perspective. But what they don't tell you is that creates more pressure on your operations and your people to adapt and conform to the way the software works. And software vendors may say, well, don't worry, it's no big deal because our software is best practice. It's the right way to do business. And I think that's an arrogant statement, first of all, for vendors to make, but they do make that statement commonly. And when people or buyers hear that, that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that, okay, your software works the way we need it to work. It's going to help us improve our business, et cetera, et cetera. And that may be largely or mostly true, but the reality is there's also a dark side and some pitfalls that go along with that. And that's where most organizations get stuck, is they don't realize that there's a dark side to going through change. And change is difficult, for better or for worse. Whether you're changing for the better or for worse, it doesn't really matter. The fact that you're changing is difficult. And it could be the best possible change, the best possible prescription or solution for your organization. People will still struggle with it because it's change and it's different and it's not the way we've always done things. And especially if you're a well-established, mature, long-standing organization and you have long tenured or highly tenured employees that have been with the organization for a long time, it's just going to be difficult to change. No matter how good the change is, it doesn't matter. It's going to be difficult. And so that's something that organizations need to just recognize. And, so I guess I'd close or summarize by saying, I don't know that it's people being gullible or lazy. I think it's people hearing what they want to hear. And that's why they make these decisions or turn a blind eye to, some of the blind spots or risky areas or aspects of transformation. And then the last comment I want to get to here today, or the last question, is it's important to note that a business can be in different levels across these areas, and that is the expectation. The struggle for most business is in executing or operationalizing what it means to achieve the goal or truly transform. Most focus on one area only, some across but in silos, and some focus on too many things without cohesive approach. Well, we all know where that leads. So I think the comment here is that, it is A, difficult to operationalize a transformation, and then B, it's hard to operate outside of silos. Organizations that have always operated in silos now are suddenly going to have an integrated solution, integrated end-to-end business processes, which is all good stuff. But again, back to the previous comment or the previous question I just answered around change being difficult, whether it's good change or bad change or somewhere in between, it's just going to be difficult. And so changing from a siloed mentality to an end-to-end process mentality is not just a process change. It's not just a technology change. It's also an organizational change. It's also a cultural change. There's a lot of change that goes along with that. And that's where so many organizations get stuck, or they don't recognize how that's a problem. So great comments from social media. So thank you to those that are consistently commenting and asking questions on social media. Wherever you listen or follow us, whether it's me personally or with Third Stage or both, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, or Facebook, be sure to just drop us questions. We're constantly monitoring that, and it gives us great content for this podcast and other YouTube videos I create as well. I often take questions from the audience and cover those in my YouTube videos as well. So thank you for that. So great questions there. We're going to shift gears here in just a moment. We're going to get into some news topics here regarding Microsoft and Adobe, who are both facing legal challenges from the EU and the United States in some of their activities. And we're going to talk about those legal actions and what it could potentially mean for the enterprise tech space and your digital transformation going forward. And then later in the show, we'll have Rob Novick on the show. He's a veteran consultant who is going to be helping me unpack this concept of understanding what it takes to be a successful consultant and how to manage your career in consulting. So we're going to take a career-oriented track here today with our primary interview here in just a few minutes. And then later in the show, after we finish up with Rob, we're going to have Jeff Nelson on the show. He's a consultant here at Third Stage Consulting. He helps clients through all kinds of ERP implementations, as does the rest of our team. And we're going to play you a clip from a recent interview I did with him where we talk about some of the keys to success in an ERP implementation. So be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
I'm gonna leave it all out there and I'm gonna leave it all out there.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 177. My name's Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. It's the company that I'm the CEO of as well. Third Stage Consulting is an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including software selection and implementation as well. So be sure to check us out at thirdstage-consulting.com. And the show is sponsored by Major Tom Productions. If you'd like to learn more about sponsorship opportunities for this podcast and other podcasts and content that we produce, be sure to check out Major Tom. You can find the contact information for that in the show notes for this podcast below. So I want to get into a couple of newsworthy items here. One's regarding Microsoft getting sued by the European Union, and the other one is about Adobe getting sued by the United States. Let's start with the European Union versus Microsoft. So Microsoft is facing 2 complaints in the EU for allegedly violating children's privacy rights through its D365 education software. The complaints filed by a privacy advocacy group called None of Your Business, or NYOB or NOYB. The organization claims that Microsoft software tracks children's data without proper consent and shifts the responsibility for data protection to schools, which lack control over the data processing systems. So as many of you may know, data privacy is a big deal worldwide, but especially in Europe, in the EU in particular, where they've got GDPR and some other types of regulations around data privacy and what you can and can't do with data, what you can and can't track with data. So this is really interesting because I would think this issue falls under the realm of GDPR, although maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure why that law wouldn't apply here. Maybe it does. I don't know. But what I do know from this article is that this group, this advocacy group called NOYB, None of Your Business, is suing Microsoft or filing the claim in the EU court system against Microsoft. And so, a few questions come from this. From this legal action. One is, what impact could these privacy issues have on the adoption and trust of educational software like Microsoft 365 in schools? That's the first question. I'd be curious to hear the audience's thoughts on this below. In the comments, just drop in the chat what you think. What do you think this privacy issue has or will have? What kind of impact will it have on the school system's trust in Microsoft 365, even outside the EU as well, in other parts of the world, in the US and other parts of Europe and Middle East and Africa and Asia Pacific, this is a big deal, and it makes you wonder what impact these privacy issues could have on adoption and trust. I personally don't know. I don't know how people will be affected by this or how it might affect their trust of Microsoft. It's hard to know how much of the concern about data privacy is coming from the government or advocacy groups versus the actual parents or the actual people that are impacted by data privacy. So I don't have a sense of that, but I do think that it's worth noting that there are allegations that software vendors like Microsoft, and I suspect others as well, have access to this information, and there's some issues around privacy and that sort of thing. Another thing that we talked about on this podcast recently, I think in the last couple of episodes, we've talked about this. In one of the last couple episodes, we've talked about this, and that is, Apple has recently announced a sort of a collaboration with OpenAI to use OpenAI in its iOS, so in the iPhone operating system, basically taking the data that is on the iPhone and integrating that with OpenAI. And people like Elon Musk and others in the industry have criticized Apple and OpenAI for this because it's a data privacy issue or potential data privacy issue. So I think it's not just Microsoft. I know Apple's facing some criticism for how it's planning to use OpenAI in its iOS operating system going forward. But this one just happens to involve a lawsuit at this point. So that makes it a little bit more noteworthy. And so another follow-up question here is, what impact could privacy issues have on the adoption and trust of educational software, which we talked about, but also, do you think this case will set a precedent for other tech companies operating in the educational sector, and how might it influence their practices? I think any tech company that's operating in Europe should take note of this legal issue or this legal dispute to see where it goes and how it unfolds. I'm not sure how it'll influence their practices, but I think, if you are a tech company, or if you're deploying technology, if you're an organization that's deploying technology, especially if you're operating in the European Union, you just need to be aware of the hypersensitivity to data privacy. And what I think is going to happen is, I don't think it's just the EU. I think other parts of the world will eventually follow suit, maybe not as quickly as the EU, but they will probably follow suit. I think the EU just happens to be the pioneer, or one of the first government entities to enter into this data privacy regulation aspect. But with AI and everything evolving with Internet of Things and just big data in general, it's inevitable that eventually the government's going to get involved and somehow try to regulate that. So interesting stuff there happening with Microsoft 365 in the school systems in Europe. Curious to hear whether you're in Europe or other parts of the world. What do you think? What do you think this means to the world of technology? So another lawsuit, though, this one is in the United States, which is where Third Stage Consulting is based. We also have an office in the EU as well. So both these topics, both the U.S. and the EU related regulations, are very relevant to us as a company, and as well as our clients in both parts of the world. And the second one here is in the U.S., and that is the U.S. government has filed a lawsuit against Adobe, alleging that the company engaged in deceptive practices by hiding termination fees and making it difficult for customers to cancel their subscriptions. That statement right there, I'm wondering how many of you listening right now find that statement to resonate with you, because it's not just Adobe that has hidden termination fees, and it's not just Adobe that makes it difficult to cancel subscriptions. So anyway, but this article and this lawsuit is focused on Adobe, even though I would argue there's a lot of software vendors that might have the same problem. The Federal Trade Commission, which is the FTC, that's a regulatory body in the U.S. that monitors or regulates trade practices and competition. They're the ones that would file antitrust lawsuits, for example, if there's monopolistic behavior happening in the industry. The FTC would generally be the one to bring a claim against whoever it is that's engaging in anti-competitive behavior. So the FTC, this regulatory body in the U.S., claims that Adobe's actions violate consumer protection laws by imposing hidden fees and creating unnecessary hurdles for users attempting to terminate their services. This lawsuit aims to address these issues and potentially impose significant penalties on Adobe for its practices. So a couple follow-up questions come out of this discussion here, this article. How do lawsuits like the one against Adobe for hidden termination fees impact the broader digital transformation strategies of companies? And here's something I haven't quite figured out in all these years that I've been in consulting is, Adobe is largely a consumer-facing technology company, although they do a lot of work in the B2B space. Most people know of Adobe more on the consumer-facing side. So I think that's one thing to note is anything that involves consumer-facing technologies or solutions or any sort of commercial behavior between a business and a consumer, that tends to get more regulatory scrutiny than B2B. And I would say that what Adobe is facing here, these allegations that they're facing here, I would argue that you could probably make these same claims against a lot of enterprise tech companies that are selling B2B. So in other words, they're selling their tech solutions to other businesses. For some reason, B2B just doesn't get the same attention, doesn't get the same eyebrows raised or the same concerns when there's anti-competitive or monopolistic behavior, or anything that sort of violates the rights of a business. It's I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's just because there's more consumers in the world than there are businesses, but whatever the reason is, that's the way the world operates. So I would say this isn't just an Adobe thing. I think if you look at SAP, if you look at Microsoft, you look at Oracle, you look at a lot of these, Workday and some of these bigger enterprise tech companies, you're going to see a lot of the same behavior, most likely, that Adobe is being sued for here. It just so happens that Adobe is selling more to consumers, so they're going to get, the brunt of the regulatory scrutiny, I suppose. But what I will be curious to know is, regardless of what happens here with this Adobe case, especially if the government is successful in its suit against Adobe, I'm curious to know if governments, not just in the US, but EU and other large regulatory bodies throughout the world, are they eventually going to set their sights on B2B enterprise technology providers? And that's a question I just don't know an answer to. It seems like inevitably over time they would eventually get around to that, but I suppose with all the consumer-facing stuff happening right now, maybe their plates are full with that, but be curious to see. So I don't know that it'll affect this action against Adobe. I don't know that it'll affect the digital transformation strategies of companies, and I don't think it'll slow them down from adopting new technologies. But what I think it does is it highlights the need for you to make sure you have a really good attorney and really good outside help in negotiating contracts with software vendors, because you don't want to lock yourself into a situation where you can't cancel your subscription, or there's super high termination fees or other hidden costs buried in the contracts, which is super common in this space. So I think if you're in a B2B space, you just have to recognize if you're buying enterprise technology, you're not going to get the same level of government regulatory support as you might if you are a consumer facing, if you're a consumer on that side of things. So just something to be aware of there. And then a follow-up question is, as businesses increasingly adopt subscription models, what best practices should they implement to ensure transparency and customer satisfaction? So I think, for you as a buyer, if you're an enterprise tech buyer, you want to make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. I think that's the key thing, is have those outside advisors that can guide you on this. Hire attorneys that specialize in this sorts of this sort of thing. And, one attorney in particular that we work closely with and have worked with over the past, but we're not affiliated with, is an attorney named Marcus Harris. He works with Taft Law. He sponsors this podcast. He sponsors some of our events. He also is someone that's been a client of ours in the past. I've done expert witness work for him in the past for a couple of different lawsuits that he's been involved with, and I'll testify in some of his cases for as an expert witness. So that's something to that's one option you have. But I think making sure you have an attorney or outside help that can help you through that process is going to be something that's really important, to make sure that you understand what flexibility you do or don't have and what kind of penalties you do or don't have. Because inevitably, a lot of organizations out there that are implementing cloud solutions, someday they're probably going to want to switch that solution. They're going to want to cancel their cloud subscription because it's not a good fit anymore, or maybe their business has changed. Maybe they've outgrown the system, whatever. That just happens. That's the way business evolves. Business changes, technology changes. Eventually, organizations are going to want out of their current cloud contracts. And the interesting thing is we have yet to see that full cycle play out. I mean, cloud is relatively new. Most organizations are still moving to the cloud. So you've got to give this like 5 or 10 more years before you see the fallout of companies that say, hey, we want out of this contract because this solution isn't a good fit for us anymore. We want to go a different direction with our technology stack. We have yet to see a wave of that happen. And when that does happen, I think there will be a day of reckoning where it's going to be super difficult. And I think maybe that's when you start to see government step in and get involved with, some of the contractual limitations that organizations are facing as they try to figure out how to move out of these cloud solutions that they committed to years or decades earlier. So something to keep an eye on, and be curious to see how that unfolds here in the coming years. So we're going to shift gears, bring our first guest on. We've got a great discussion planned for you here today. We're going to talk about careers in business and technology consultant with Rob Novick, who's the CEO of a company called Pasture Advisors. Rob is someone that I used to work for back 20 years ago. I worked for him. He and I started companies sort of in parallel, 2 different companies. He sold his company. I left my previous company to start a new one. And now he advises us here at Third Stage. He's sort of a consultant and an executive advisor to our company. So he's been in the consulting space for a long time. He's someone who I've always viewed as a mentor in my career. So I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about just what it takes to be successful in consulting, how to get started, how to further your career, what are some of the hard and soft skills you need to know and understand and be good at to be good at consulting. So I'm very excited to have him on the show here in just a few minutes. So we'll bring him on the show, and then later we'll have Jeff Nelson, who's from the Third Stage Consulting team. He's going to be on the show talking about ERP implementation best practices. So we've got a lot more to cover. This is a sort of an epic episode with a lot of content, so be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 177. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital strategy, their software selection, their implementation, the program management, change management, architecture and integration, process improvement, basically all the stuff you need to be successful in your digital transformation. That's what we do at Third Stage Consulting. And you can learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. So I'm excited for our first guest of the show here today is Rob Novick. He's the CEO of a company called Pasture Advisors, which advises companies that are going through growth. He advises them on how to scale for growth. He advises them on how to create an exit strategy and either sell their companies or look for outside private equity investments. And that's exactly what he's helping us do. He helps us at Third Stage Consulting. He's helping us with our growth strategy and with our investment strategies with outside third parties. And he's not only that, but he's also my former boss. I used to work for him, and I learned a lot about consulting through him. In fact, a lot of how I approach consulting and a lot of my philosophy and style to consulting, I learned through him. And so he's been super influential on my style and my just personal career journey. Has been very helpful and continues to be very helpful in a different capacity here today as he advises us on how to grow our company and how to scale internationally and achieve the aggressive growth that we've achieved here in the last several years. So I'm excited to have him on the show. He not only advises us, but he advises other high growth companies through their growth and scale. And so he's sort of a career consultant like myself. He's been doing consulting for a long time, and I'm excited to have him here today. So Rob, with all that being said, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure, Eric. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. And before I ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, just a sort of a disclaimer. I don't know if it's really a disclaimer, but just to share with the audience, I suppose is a better way to say it. You and I go way back. I used to work for you 25 years ago. I worked for you, or 20. I guess it was more like 20 years ago. I'm not that old, but 20 years ago, you and I first started working together. You're an advisor to Third Stage Consulting now, but I learned a lot about consulting through you. And not to put you on the spot or put too much pressure on you, but the reason I wanted to have you on this podcast is because I learned so much about what I think it takes to be a good consultant. I learned through you. So I'm really excited to have you on the show here today. But before we sort of dive into some of these questions around consulting advice and that sort of thing, tell us a little bit about your extensive background in the consulting space and also what you're up to here nowadays with Blue Pasture Advisors.
Sure. I guess it's really kind of three parts, and I'll try not to make this too long. I actually started my career at Bell Labs, and my area of expertise at the time was machine learning. And I read once in a newspaper at Bell Labs about a company called McKinsey, and it got me very interested in consulting. So this is in the mid 80s. I wound up going back to business school, took a job in Europe with a consultancy that did work as the telecom industry deregulated across Europe. And we spent about 2 years there. And when I came back to the United States, I joined a company called North Highland. Eric, you remember North Highland? I know that.
I do.
Business consulting, management consulting, really an awesome organization. I couldn't say enough great things about my time at North Highland. But you could count the number of employees on two hands when I started. And when we reached about 700, things were different. The culture was different. The leadership was different. And so I started my own firm. I put half a bottle of wine into my wife, and out came the name Envision. And that's where the business name came from. And we started. I had a partner, and we wound up being just moderately successful. Ultimately sold to private equity. We merged with another firm, and then sold that to a very large international IT firm. And I kind of retired. But the thing that got me to Blue Pasture is what I really loved to do, which was advising organizations on how to grow. And I was always interested in the transaction part of things. And so that's how we got there. And Blue Pasture has been around now for about a year and a half. It's been a very enjoyable ride so far.
Yeah, it's sort of an opportunity for you to apply your consulting experience because you sort of are still consulting, but it's in a different context now. How maybe explain the types of clients you work with now, or how you made that transition from traditional consulting into what you're doing now with Blue Pasture.
Yeah, at Envision, we work with really the Fortune 1000. So these are large companies, and anybody who's been in consulting for a while knows that you do a program or you give advice, and it kind of goes into whatever mechanism there is within that organization, and by the time it filters through to some result at the bottom, it could be years if you ever see it at all. Working with smaller organizations now, really in the middle market, we're looking at organizations from maybe 5 to 100 million top line. Those results are right there at the fore, right? You make changes, you get to see those changes. It's kind of like running my own business, where I was able to make a decision and make a change. And now it's really through advising the executive teams. But for me, the tie back to Envision was we created 4 divisions at Envision. There was the Envision Business Consulting, a thing called Envision Capital, which I'll get back to, Envision Talent, where we helped place people at our clients, and then we had the Envision Foundation. We gave 5% of our profits to local not-for-profits trying to do good in the communities where we worked. But Envision Capital, the whole idea was taking some of the proceeds from consulting, investing those in smaller organizations, and trying to build wealth for our employees. It was a great idea. Occasionally we got sidecar funding. Ultimately, though, the problem was that in order to grow consulting, it really sucked all the air out of the room. So there was not a whole lot of money to invest in these other companies, which we then in turn hope to advise. And that looks exactly like Blue Pasture today.
Interesting. So you sort of took that idea and sort of ran with that as a focus area.
Yeah, I pulled the piece that I enjoyed the most out of that and kind of resurrected it, and here we are now.
Interesting. So back in the day when you read this article about McKinsey you were talking about, and actually I don't know this part of your background, even though you and I have known each other forever. I didn't know this piece of it, but you read about a company called McKinsey. What was it that triggered or piqued your interest that said, hey, I might want to go back to business school and become a consultant? What drew you to the field?
It was the projects. I can't remember the exact article, but it was the projects that they were talking about. And McKinsey had this cachet that, they were all about business. And it was so funny being at AT&T and the work that we were doing was so focused on one small area. I had no idea that this was going on in the world, that there were actually people who advised businesses. I mean, in a way, it sounds so naive, but that was the truth. It's, every once in a while you get exposed to something that you actually didn't know existed. And so I started to do research, and AT&T was actually very supportive of it and paid for my first year of business school with no strings attached. So my wife and I were actually very happy about that. That was another, little box of gold that we wound up stumbling across.
Especially at that age, that point in your career when you're getting started out, it's nice to have someone pay for your school there.
Absolutely.
And another interesting thing, I don't want to gloss over this detail of your background, but I find it super fascinating, is your degree was in artificial intelligence, right? You studied artificial intelligence 30, 35 years ago. Is that right?
So, no, my degree was math.
Okay.
But the work that we did at the time it wasn't really called artificial intelligence. In the 80s, it was called machine learning, where I was. And it was a lot of self-modifying code, that kind of stuff. And it really was fantastic. And, for those people who are familiar with Unix and C, I worked in a building where the people who invented that actually worked. And if you had a question, or you could go to, somebody and say, this technology that you invented, it doesn't work. It doesn't work the way, as advertised. I was always wrong. I will tell you that. I would go in and I would say, this doesn't work. And they were like, you're using it wrong, or you're doing it wrong. And they would explain it to me, and they were right. And I would go back to work, and I would apply what they told me. But that was one of the greatest parts about being there, was you were just involved with all these just fantastic minds. Everybody was smarter than me. I don't know how the hell I got in there.
Right. It's a great feeling, though. I mean, it's humbling, I suppose, but it's also a great feeling, because I've had that feeling too, where you're like, wow, I'm around a bunch of really smart people, and I feel a little humbled, but I'm going to just take advantage of the opportunity to learn from all these people.
Absolutely. Enjoy the ride. I'll fake it until somebody either figures me out or I find success.
Right. Well, I think that's super interesting that you were starting to touch a field that 30, 35 years ago, I didn't even know machine learning had a name back then, to be honest. So it's interesting that you were doing something that's so hot right now and so trendy right now. So I guess that's one way of saying you're 30, 35 years ahead of your time. You're a pioneer in the machine learning / AI space.
That's really flattering, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you're too. I like giving you compliments because you're so humble. I know you don't like it. And it makes you mildly uncomfortable. So I'll try to do that a couple more times throughout this interview, just to put you on the spot. I'm here with Rob Novick, and we're talking about some advice for your career in business and technology consulting. I've got a lot more questions for Rob, a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 177. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Rob Novick. We're talking about some advice and some tips for how to further your career and be successful in business and technology consulting. Before I sort of dive into some of my questions, I want to turn to the audience real quick. We've got a lot of good responses here to the real simple question: where are you joining from today, and what country are you in? I want to say hello to a few people: Sabir in Lewis Center, U.S., Amy from Houston, Texas. We've got someone from Pune, India, someone from Istanbul, Jazree's from Toronto. We've got someone, others from joining from throughout the U.S. as well. So thank you for being here today. Here's a question from Darian, and this is actually similar to a question I was going to ask you too, Rob, but just to sort of set the context or to get things started here in the conversation, what are some of the things, the number one things that a newer consultant should focus on? I don't want to start with people that are maybe just earlier in their careers or they're thinking about getting into consulting. You know, there's so much to think about as a consultant. You know, there's so much you feel like you need to learn from a technical hard skill set to some of the intangibles. What if you had to pick one thing, you know, if I'm a new consultant, what's that one piece of advice or that one skill set that you think is important?
Well, not to expand the question, but you have to kind of split it into two parts, I think. There are those who are looking to join a consultancy and kind of what is that number one thing? And then there's, once you're there and you've started, what's the one thing? I think going into an organization, organizations, I believe, look either primarily at skill set and skill set fit, or culture and cultural fit. Because they say, if we have a good cultural fit, I can teach this person the things that we do and the way that we do it, right? Our methodologies, et cetera. Others say, I have certain skills that I'm looking for, whether they're technology assets or whatever, and it has to fit that way. So I would say, which one are you going to rely on? And you can narrow down what organizations are going to feel the best to you when you go in. And then I think once you're in, what makes you successful, at least in the beginning, there are things that make you successful later, is listen. Do a lot of listening. Listen to clients, listen to people who have been there for a while. Share your opinions, but listen. There's a lot to learn. Consulting, I believe, is very nuanced. And one of the things that always got me when I was, I guess, a younger consultant was we would see new people who were coming in and we would talk to them about consulting, and they would say, I've worked with 1 million consultants, I know consulting. That is not true. I religiously go to the dentist every 6 months. I know exactly what every one of those tools on that tray does. You do not want me working on your teeth.
Yes.
That's all right? So consulting is really an industry unto itself. We come in contact with a lot of consultants in business, but that doesn't necessarily mean it makes you a good consultant.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. And, the other thing I'd add to that is I think, when you're starting off as a consultant, there's the tendency to want to prove, like you were saying, prove that you belong, like prove that I'm smart enough and I belong in this consulting industry. So I need to demonstrate to you, the client or my peers or whatever, I need to demonstrate all the things I know. And I think, it's hard for a lot of new consultants, especially, to say it's okay if you don't know everything. You can't know everything, no matter how long you've been doing it. So asking questions, listening, and understanding what the client's needs are, what their challenges are, what problem that's unique to them they're facing. I think that's a nuance that a lot of consultants just sort of gloss over and say, I've got the answers. I've done this before. I've seen the situation before. I know what this client needs, rather than taking the time to listen and understand. And I think that's one of the nuances that I've learned from you, is you've got to ask really good questions and really understand before you start prescribing and, doing your traditional consulting stuff.
Yeah, I think after you do it long enough, you realize that while every problem is unique, all of the business problems probably fall into somewhere between 8 and 12 buckets, right? And you know it. I've heard this before. I have a pretty good idea of what this is. I may need 6 weeks to figure out that I'm right about it, that the problem that I think it is really is this. But you get good at recognizing them, and then whatever solution you come up with really has to be tailored to the organization, because their culture is going to be different, their processes are going to be different, their people are going to be different, leadership is going to be different, right? You can't take the solution from here, lift it, and put it there, and then it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even if you know what the 8 to 12 buckets are, and you've seen those 8 to 12 buckets before, the combination of issues and the way it all comes together in a potential solution is usually different. I mean, it's going to have pieces that you recognize from before that you've used before, but it's like your toolbox. You've got this huge toolbox. You've used the tools before over time as you get more established in your career. But even as long as you and I have been doing this, you rarely see a situation where, like, I've seen this exact same situation before. I know it looks exactly like this other client I worked with before. I mean, I can't remember the last time I thought that. I don't even know if I've ever thought that, to be honest.
Yeah.
So really interesting. So just in general then, so listening, you talk about listening and understanding. What do you think some of the other keys are? And you talk about culture, of course, that's very important. I want to come back to that cultural thing, which is a really important one. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But what are some of the other hard and soft skills that you think are important for consultants, whether they're new consultants or established consultants?
Yeah. Well, I think you answered one of them already, which is ask questions. Ask lots of questions. There seems to be this fear, usually for younger consultants, newer consultants, to ask questions, sometimes that they think, they should know the answer to, right? We've already kind of covered that too. I think the truth is it's always great to hear it from the client's perspective of, how do you see this? What do you think is the answer? And another one, especially as you become more mature, is knowing the right time to ask for the business, which is another thing. Business development, I may upset some people by saying this, but I can always find somebody to deliver the work. Always. All right. And too often there's this hubris with delivery consultants that they're the most important. You are important. You're important to the client. You're important to the organization. But some pigs are more equal than others, if you remember Animal Farm.
Right.
And that is the consultant who can deliver, craft solutions, and close a deal is way more valuable to the organization because they are a lot harder to find. And you have to begin to develop those skills. You have to, and it's a lot of it is timing, it's nuance, and you got to understand when the right time is and how to get the client away from whatever it is that they're thinking about to focus on the problem. Sometimes, right, it's dinner. It's a dark restaurant where you have a little bit of time and you can finally ask the question of the client, are you ready to do this now? And this is how much I think it's going to cost. And to be able to kind of craft the solution right there. I used to love that. When I was a kid, we would go to this restaurant called a Ground Round, which some people probably remember. They had peanuts on the floor and popcorn and stuff. But they had this magician, and he would come to the table and he would do stuff right there. He'd roll up his sleeves, and he'd make an egg appear out of like thin air and then make it disappear. And I always thought about that as kind of business development is actually you're at the table there with, right, the client, and you're crafting that solution right there. And you don't have all the answers, but you have enough of the pieces that you pique their interest and they say, yeah, this really makes sense. Well, great. Let me go back. Let me talk to my team. We're going to put this together. We're going to put a letter together. We're going to put it in front of you and we're going to move forward.
Yeah. That's a great analogy or metaphor with the magician. But I think, going back to a word that you use, I think is critical to maybe unpack a little bit. And that word is hubris. And I think, just to build on that, I mean, I take it one step further and say, I think one of the most damaging or the most ineffective and undermining traits that a consultant can have is that hubris. That, in other words, that thought that I have the answers. I know everything I need to know. And I think, you see this usually people that are more mid to late career consultants they've been doing it for 20, 30 years or however long. They've been working with the same technology or the same type of business consulting. And they start to get this mentality of, yeah, I've seen this before. I know the answer. I don't need to take the time to understand you, Mr. or Mrs. Client, because I've done this a million times. The minute you do that, I think, you become a lot less effective because the client starts to feel like, hey, you're not listening, you're not understanding. Even if you do understand the perceptions, you're not, because you're not taking the time to understand. And then second, it tells me that you're not continuously sharpening your axe, you're sharpening your saw and continuing to learn and understand. And the minute you stop learning and understanding, I think you stop being a good consultant. And the minute you start thinking you have all the answers, I think you stop being a good consultant. But I'm curious here. I know that's a strong statement, but want to hear what your thoughts are if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that, Eric, because one of the mistakes that I've made, and I've seen others make enough times to know that it happens, and it happens like all the time. That's an exaggeration. I don't mean all the time, but what I mean is we can't seem to learn it as an industry. Okay, so here's the situation. You're in a room, maybe it's two of you, two consultants, and you're talking with the client, and let's just say there's three of them there. And this is your third conversation that you're having about this problem and the solution. And during that meeting, a fourth person from the client walks in, and you miss the opportunity to A, find out who that person is, and B, catch them up on where you are. You don't bring them up to speed, and you wind up excluding them from the conversation, and you're never invited back, because the person who entered was actually, let's just say, the gal with the checkbook or somebody important.
CEO or something.
Yep, that you didn't bother to figure out who they were, and you were moving ahead with a solution, and they had a different idea of what that solution was, but you in your mind already thought this was sold and it was done, and you're go and forget, I don't mean sold like dollars sold, but rather that the idea was accepted by the client, and you didn't bother to bring this person up to speed, and the thing falls apart.
And the thing is, it doesn't matter how brilliant that solution was. It could have been the most brilliant, most spot on solution that you're recommending, but it doesn't matter because you didn't sell it. You didn't convince the right decision makers or the right influencers in the company.
That's right. And in a mid-sized consultancy, you really want the client to think in a lot of ways that either it was their idea or that certainly they were part of the solution. I think with some of the really large organizations, if you're going to do, let's say, a large SAP implementation, there's a lot of organizations, right? They've never gone through it. And so they are just relying on you for all your knowledge and all your advice. They have no idea of what this is going to look like. And so, not to say that it's easier, but the path has been walked many times to say, look, these are the things that make this a success, and these are the things that make it fail. And we can take you through that. And so sometimes moving through that process is just a little bit easier than kind of pure play management or business consulting, where the solutions themselves feel very unique to the client because they don't know other people who've kind of gone through this problem before.
I'm here with Rob Novick, and we're talking about some advice for your career in business and technology consulting. I've got a lot more questions for Rob, a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology independent and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 177. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Rob Novick. We're talking about some advice and some tips for how to further your career and be successful in business and technology consulting. You know, one nuance too, just to add to that, is, you know, it kind of goes along with this whole thread of everything you're saying around listening, asking questions, making sure you don't have this hubris or this arrogance that consultants can sometimes have. But I'm also thinking that, like, you know, a lot of times consultants need to know, or I'm sorry, not consultants, clients, the clients you're consulting to, they need to know that you are listening and understanding. And so I feel like so much of what consultants need to do, but oftentimes overlook, is repeating back to the client what they already know. You know, repeating back to the client, here's my understanding of what your problem is, for example, or here's my understanding of those things that are keeping you up at night. You know, these things that are really that we're trying to address here. And the minute you do that, I mean, my opinion is that's almost as important as the solution you're going to come back with. Because the minute you do that, you build this connection and this trust and this understanding that the client says, hey, you understand me, you heard me, you were listening to me, you understand who we are, what's unique about us. Now I'm a little more open to your suggestions. Whereas if I skip over that, even if I do understand the client situation, but I don't prove to them that I do, then all of a sudden I don't trust that you really understood or listened to what I said or what my problems are, what's keeping me up at night. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something you've seen as well? Or?
Yeah, and I think there's a trick to this too with clients, which is I was always fond of saying, all right, this is what I'm hearing. And then I repeat it back. And so there's none of us like to be wrong. I don't want to be wrong. So sometimes I'm not going to say anything, because if I say it, I'm going to be wrong. But if I say, this is what I'm hearing, is this what you're telling me? Nobody's wrong, right? You kind of, it becomes disarming. Well, yeah, that is what I'm saying. And now you can ask maybe some more pointed questions, or they're going to correct you and say, well, that's not exactly what I was saying. Okay, this is good. Then tell me again. Another one was, if I was uncomfortable, I always advised our people to say, keep talking. Meaning, tell the client to keep talking.
Right.
Okay, tell me more. Tell me more. Just kind of free think for me. And again, it puts you as the consultant a little bit at ease. It gives you a chance maybe to catch up, because they're either talking fast and you're not quite getting all the ideas maybe, or they've been in it for so long and you don't understand all the stuff on the periphery. Getting them to talk, sometimes they'll connect the dots for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're a newer consultant too. That's a great little trick. I don't want to say trick as it's not a scam. It's a trick though to take pressure off you and what you don't know. I mean, you talked about being around people that are smarter than you, and I still, you know, even at work every day, I feel like the people that work for Third Stage are a lot smarter than I am. But so there's a lot I don't know, and the longer I do consulting, ironically, the more I realize how much I don't know. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I feel like I know a lot, but there's a lot I realize every day how much I don't know. Yeah. And I think the more you can ask questions, the more it just deflects that pressure to have all the answers and to know everything that you feel like you should know. And it's interesting when you do ask the client things, and when you could, even if you can summarize back to a client what they just said, they give you a little 5-minute overview and you can summarize it back to them right after that. the minute you do that, it's always interesting to me how the client will say, yeah, exactly. And it's sort of like they're sold, that you haven't even prescribed anything yet. You haven't given them any sort of solution, but the fact that you just repeated back to them what they said and you clearly understand it, to me, that's half of it right there. And then the other half, of course, is, all right, what are we going to do about it? And how am I going to help you fix that problem?
Right. But I think you often have more latitude in how you're going to fix the problem than whether you're right. You can't take a million years to learn what the problem is.
Right.
I used to have a boss a long time ago who said there was no money in current state. There's no value in current state. Get through current state as fast as you can, because all the value is in future state. Okay,
right.
What are you gonna do? And I like your comment about everybody being smarter than you. You're surrounding yourself by with smarter people, and I think good consultants really enjoy that, because good consultants really like to learn. And one of the things that makes a great consultant is how fast they can learn, how fast they can assimilate new ideas and data and be able to both evolve their position and maybe change it or explore things that weren't first thought of. So you've come up with an idea of what the solution is going to be, but something else comes, and being able to, I hate the word pivot, but being able to pivot and say, yeah, maybe this isn't it, or it has a little bit over here. And I always enjoyed that part too of learning, right? Learning more. There's, seeking out that other person who's got either the kooky idea or who's smarter than you. The only trouble with that is sometimes it's just hard to keep up with those people.
Right.
Right. That they're coming up with this stuff and they're connecting dots faster than you can. And you just, at the end of it, you got to say, okay, explain that to me again.
Yeah.
Outside the meeting.
You're just trying to stay afloat.
That's right.
Right. And, clients too, I feel like a lot of the learning that I learn every day, and the reason I like to stay connected with our clients, even as we've grown and even as I've backed out of or moved above, from some of the day-to-day delivery stuff on the consulting side, I learned so much from clients. I mean, it's so funny because they hire us because we're the ones that know what we're doing. We're the smart ones. We're the ones that have the answers and the experience that they're looking for. But I learned so much just from talking to a client, like what, the challenges they're going through and, their history as an organization. Sometimes there's industries we'll deal with because we work in so many different industries. There's industries I didn't even know existed. I'm like, there's a whole industry around that. I had no idea. And, or you built a $1 billion company doing this. I'm like, that's insane. I didn't know that. I didn't know that existed. And tell me more, and so you end up learning so much about just the world in general by being a consultant, which I think is probably the most rewarding part.
Yeah. Well, thinking of that too, I've had clients say, well, why should I hire you? Why should we hire you? And consultants have the luxury of focus, right? You guys here in this company are doing 6-8 jobs. You're doing everything, right? I can come in and solve this one problem for you because I can focus on it.
Right. Yeah. While you run your business the way you've been running it for however long, and I can focus on this problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also that, you're not tethered by the politics and the internal stuff that, clients have to deal with every day by being part of their organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question from Amy on LinkedIn. This is an interesting thought. I cannot answer this question, Rob, just to be clear, just because I'm a career consultant. You might be able to answer it better than me. But I've worked with a few consultants at McKinsey and EY that transitioned to consulting with around 20 years of experience working in industry. What are your thoughts on mid-career transitions into the field? So in other words, people that aren't career consultants, they didn't start off like you and I did early in our careers becoming consultants. They decide halfway through or however long into their career, like, hey, I want to take this knowledge and these skills I've built and I want to become a consultant. How have you seen that work in the past in terms of mid-career transitions?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, but some people are just natural consultants, right? I mean, they just walk around that way and they fit into the organization really easy. And Eric, I've seen you hire some people who, didn't have a consulting background necessarily, but you saw in them the, ability. They were natural consultants. They just kind of worked and acted that way. They asked good questions. They seemed to fit in. They were pretty easygoing, right? Not
They're
very
humble.
arrogant,
Yeah.
humble, exactly. And then you have kind of the other side where people who have joined after 20 or 30 years in a different career who have an expectation that, well, I was a vice president in this organization and I'm coming into the consulting organization and I should be, a big man. I should be a vice president or whatever it is. And that doesn't always work so great because you have to learn the industry of consulting. And so I think he'd wind up taking a step back. So
Yeah.
unfortunately for Amy, I'm sorry that I think it's a mixed bag. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I would say if you're hiring in the consultancy, one of these 20 or 30-year career people from the outside, just interview the hell out of them. Figure it. You'll know whether it's going to be a fit or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Based on the questions they're asking and how they interact in that emotional intelligence, that EQ, I think that's the most important skill. You need someone that has a minimum level of knowledge, that's important, but that the EQ, I think, is regardless of whether you're mid-career or starting out, as a junior consultant, I think that emotional intelligence is way more important than the tangible hard skills you have.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you can teach the other stuff, but you can't teach how to be humble. If someone's an arrogant a-hole, you can't teach them not to be an arrogant a-hole anymore. You need, you can't teach someone to be humble if they're not. But
that's a big hill to climb.
It is. Yeah. And we've talked about it in passing. We've been sort of dancing around this really important thread around culture. So I want to spend a few minutes diving into culture here. But in your opinion, what kind of company culture, in the companies you've built and worked with and advised, you advise consulting firms now, including Third Stage, you advise us on how to help us scale and grow our company. But what kind of company culture do you see as being the most conducive to creating great consultants and great consultant output?
All right. So I kind of knew this question was coming at a point. And as a backdrop, as a preface to the answer of this, we get to maybe the definition of normal. And I believe that the way you fit into an organization, best consulting or not, is we find an organization who shares our dysfunction. And what I mean by that is there is no normal. There's weird stuff on both sides, right? We know that. We can recognize that. But take the other whatever, 85% of people, the rest of us, we all have some dysfunction. And if we can find an organization whose dysfunction matches our dysfunction, we think we're normal. We walk in, we're like, this place is great. I get them. They're all like me. And
right.
And it works, right? And so you think about that. There are some organizations that tend to go to market. They tend to be more arrogant, or they tend to be more introverted, or they tend to be more like golden retrievers, right? And if you're one of those, a golden retriever or arrogant or what, you find that organization, you're gonna fit in, and you can't really say that being one of those cultures is going to be successful or not successful, because they all exist out there, right? And chances are they're looking for clients whose dysfunction also matches the culture of the consulting organization. So when you're looking, it's probably talking to a lot of people to see how they act. I have a kid who just graduated from college, and he was going through the interview process. And I had to remind him that you're interviewing them for these jobs as much as they're interviewing you. And as young people, we tend to go in and we just want them to love us. And if they love us, it's going to be great. Yeah, we all want to be loved, but at the same time, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to see if they're going to fit with you. Are you going to feel comfortable there, or have you kind of been pretending who you are? And then when you join the organization, I mean, it's hard to pretend for a long time. You kind of have to be yourself. Eric, I don't even know if I've answered your question. I got so lost in my preamble here. So let's kind of attack that one again.
I'm here with Rob Novick, and we're talking about some advice for your career in business and technology consulting. I've got a lot more questions for Rob, a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 177. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Rob Novick. We're talking about some advice and some tips for how to further your career and be successful in business and technology consulting. There's two things, the emotional intelligence piece of it, but also the understanding, is this the right place for me as a consultant? By asking questions, like, for example, one question I love to ask, and I actually really like it when people ask me when I'm interviewing people, but when I was interviewing, I used to love to ask, what does the ideal consultant look like? I mean, what types of consultants fit in the best to this organization? And then I'll ask which ones don't. What are the types of consultants or the types of people that you've hired that don't work out here? Or what type of personality or skill set is not going to fit here? And really just understanding, like, does that sound right to me? And then it also demonstrates, it also helps, because again, back to the emotional intelligence thing and asking questions and understanding, by doing that, you're seeking to understand, which is going to build a deeper connection with that consulting firm. But I guess, coming back to this, I think the problem here is culture is such a massive Pandora's box of stuff that we could spend 2 hours just talking about a consulting culture, which unfortunately we don't have time for. But the question is more around like the company culture, and what type of culture do you think, or is there a type of culture that consulting firms should have, or traits they should have that's going to that's going to create great consultants and a great consulting output?
Yeah. I think one that allows for mistakes.
Hmm.
I think one that pushes younger people to achieve more. I like the idea of having an organization um, allow a younger consultant to kind of be on the trapeze, so to speak, but operate as a net below them, right? We're going to let you fly, but if you fall, we're going to be there to catch you. You're
Right.
not going to tank the organization. Um, we don't want you to make the same mistake again and again. So, there's learning that needs to be involved. But I think that and the ability to be entrepreneurial within the organization. Eric, if you think about this, North Highland did a great job um, with all of us, and it was the leadership at the time. North Highland has gone out and produced so many entrepreneurs. People left that organization. It's like, you did, I did, and
Hmm.
I can count a whole bunch of other people who wound up going on their own. And why is that? Is it the way they hired? Maybe, but I also think um, it was the way they cultivated the people there by allowing us to make these mistakes, by allowing us to do business development on our own and kind of learning how to do that and advising us. Um, those were probably the two biggest things. And again, I loved that organization. I thought it was a great and it probably still is. It was a great organization that allowed me to really flourish. Um, and other people, I think, would turn around and say, "Well, Accenture is a great organization." I never worked at Accenture. I couldn't tell you from the inside what the culture is like. Um, So was that a little bit closer to the
Yeah.
spirit of your question?
Yeah, it is, and I think culture is something that is important for you to look at. Whether you're interviewing with a consulting firm to potentially go work for the consulting firm, but also if you're hiring a consulting firm, you want to understand and be sure you understand the culture, not just their qualifications and the past client experience and all that stuff. The hard stuff. You also want to look at the soft stuff, which is can I work for this
Yeah.
organization or can I work with this organization if I'm hiring them? And I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's back to your question of what makes a good consultant, right? Asking that in the interview process or what makes one successful, and it's the hard skills and the soft skills. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What about the are there any different skills that people need to have nowadays in consulting than maybe was important 10, 20 years ago? How in other words, how has the requirements of being a good consultant changed, if at all, here in recent years for people that are just starting out in consulting?
Um, well, I think one of the big changes that's occurred in consulting in the industry itself is it's become very broad. Everybody's a consultant
Mhm.
now. And certainly when I started, I don't know, 30 years ago, maybe more, um, there were kind of technology consultants and there were management consultants. And right in management, you had operations, you had human capital, you had strategy, you had, right there. But now you might have people developing code overseas for $40 an hour that are consultants. They fit
Right.
into that box. Um, so I would say first we have to kind of narrow the field a little bit. And when I think of consultants, I think of the traditional, right, view of management consultants, kind of where I started of, right, operational strategy, human capital, that kind of stuff, and technology, of course. And then there are even divisions within technology that breaks down further into degrees of specialization. I think, though, that the way it has changed is there is greater need for specialization. So more focused on your area of expertise, your field of expertise, where I think being a generalist years ago really carried the day. I think it still does. I think it's still a great skill to have, but being able to be a generalist and a specialist at the same time is great. And then, of course, trying to keep up with, the newer technologies is also terrific. When I remember when I was a younger consultant, there was a lot of COBOL out there, and people were looking for consultants. They were starting to pay more and more for COBOL programmers because they just couldn't find them anywhere, and nobody wanted to do it. And so I think that there are still plenty of kind of legacy technologies or legacy techniques that people need to know because you can make a living there. The only trouble is if you stay there too long, you fall behind the curve, and it's a lot harder to catch up.
Yeah.
So
how do you this might be a tough question, but I'll ask it anyway. But how do you balance that need for specialization, especially now with technology changing and evolving so quickly? There's just no way for you to know everything about every technology and every business solution that's out there. So especially earlier in your career, you have to sort of focus and pick an area you're going to hone in on. But at the same time, to be a really good consultant, to be a great consultant, I would argue you have to understand how the big picture works and how what you're doing over here on the technology side affects the people and the process side and the strategy side and vice versa. So how do you navigate that? And I struggle with this myself, to be honest. I mean, even now, 25 years into my career, I still struggle with like how much do I want to specialize versus how much do I want to have a big picture, broad understanding of how business and technology and strategy all fits together.
I think part of that is it might just be personal. Is I realized early on that I was in a career that was very focused. Right, we would pick an idea and we would drill just a mile deep, and it didn't give me the same buzz. It didn't excite me the way the big picture does. I'm almost just the way I walk around the world. I'm a strategy guy. I'm a big picture guy. That's just it. My wife tells me all the time. She's like, "Come on, focus," because I'm somewhere else. My head is somewhere else. I'm putting bigger pieces together. And so I admire those people who can focus that way and drill down. But maybe to answer your question specifically, companies also don't move as fast as the technology does, right? They have something embedded in their organization. They're not going to change it every 6 months because things are changing. They're like, I got to run a business. My business is not the technology. The technology supports my business. And so, knowing some of this legacy stuff isn't such a bad idea because you can actually help your client with the problems that they actually have.
Right.
I think we just have to force ourselves to try to learn new stuff, read articles, be involved in projects that have something new that I haven't been exposed to before. And over time, I think you just get better at putting these pieces together and constantly building that big picture. I think, right, seeing enough of it it's almost automatic. It forces you to see the big picture in a way, whether you want to or not, unless you just stay in this very specific place your whole career.
Yeah.
So how's that for kind of a non-answer?
No, it's a great one, and it's. I think what you're saying is there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I think it's a matter of kind of fitting to your personality, and I would say that if you do specialize, I think it's important to at least secondarily understand the big picture outside of your specialization, because you have to understand what the impacts are of what you're doing here over in this little thread that you're honed in on or focused on. There are impacts to other parts of things that maybe you're not an expert in, but it's helpful to understand that, for example, if I, deploy a, off the shelf cloud solution that's relatively rigid or inflexible or whatever you want to call it, that's my specialization. That's okay. Keep doing that. But you need to understand, well, there's a people impact to that too now. Like, people are not going to adapt to that change as easily as if you had a highly customized solution that you're deploying. And so not to say, well, then you should change your specialization because there's a negative impact potentially. It's just, no, to just understand what that is and understand that the work you're doing has an impact over here. And you have to just be able to, at the very least, empathize with how that affects other parts of what you do.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Eric.
I'm just going to pull out some interesting, just random comments here before I get to a couple other questions I have for you, Rob. But here's a comment from a few minutes ago from Sabir on YouTube. It says 1980 machine learning. Some discussion on the Simulmatics company would be very relevant. I don't know what that is, but I don't know if you've heard that term, Simulmatics.
I haven't.
All right. Well, that's all right. It's a little out of scope we're not going to get into 80s machine learning in this conversation, but interesting comment there. Here's another comment, just sort of agreeing with something you said earlier, Rob from LinkedIn. 100% agree. Ask questions before you diagnose and prescribe a solution. So thank you for that comment there. And then here's a question or a comment from William on YouTube. William says, yes, getting real buy-in requires artful communication with key situational influencers. Newbies get a hint of yes and barrel through the process, then inevitably run into implementation problems. So I think that's well said. If you don't take that time to understand the influencers and the politics, that's another thing. You have to understand the politics of the organizations you're consulting to, and not, for better or for worse. There's probably some weird, unhealthy or ineffective politics and things that happen internally, organizationally. You have to understand that lay of the land, that understanding. And back to your point, Rob, the value being in the future state, not the current state. My response to that would be, well, you can't be effective in the future state unless you understand the current state, because you've got to be able to navigate those pitfalls and those landmines along the way. I'm here with Rob Novick, and we're talking about some advice for your career in business and technology consulting. I've got a lot more questions for Rob, a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
These things take time. Mom and dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 177. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Rob Novick. We're talking about some advice and some tips for how to further your career and be successful in business and technology consulting. William, who I know watches a lot of our stuff and knows that I like rock and roll. Maybe he even sees the Def Leppard album right behind my head here. He says, FYI, Def Leppard is on tour this summer. Big show. So totally out of scope, but thank you. I appreciate the comment there. So just some fun comments and thoughts from the audience there. So just, I want to ask you two closing questions here, Rob. One is for people that are starting off in consulting, and the other one is going to be for people that are maybe further along in their careers and they're trying to either transition to consulting or take their consulting to the next level. Let's start with people starting off in consulting, people that are just starting off. What closing advice would you have? Like if you're going to leave people with one or two things as they think about how they enter the world of consulting, what would that be?
I think it's kind of a multifaceted answer of what in this is going to make you happy. There's a financial component to it. Some people are comfortable with travel. Some people are not. I think you got to look at the organization. Are you going to be traveling? Are you going to be local? Are you going to be remote? What does that look like? Is there an opportunity, let's say, to work overseas? Maybe something that you want, as well as, think about, I used the word earlier, dysfunction, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I think you get my meaning, which is find the organization where you fit, where you can thrive. And I get it. Sometimes we don't have a lot of options, right? I had one offer, great. I'm going to take the offer. I'm going to learn there, and then over time, I'm going to move. But maybe it's for every career. Somebody who's young, be patient with yourself. It's okay to be impatient, but be patient with yourself. You need to evolve as well. There are things you need to learn, and you're going to make some of these mistakes. And I always thought it was baloney that you're going to make a mistake and you're going to learn from that mistake. I can tell you there are certain mistakes I have made my whole life. Hopefully, the time between making that mistake has grown and the amplitude of that mistake has been somewhat lowered. But, you got to forgive yourself a little bit. You make the mistake and you keep moving on.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially like you said at the very beginning of this conversation, you're going to be surrounded by people that are smarter than you and have much more experience than you. And it can be a bit intimidating, and it can make, at least when I started off, I felt like I had to be at that level. I had to quickly be at that same level of knowledge and understanding. And the reality is I wasn't. So, I was trying to pretend to be something I wasn't. And that's something I would not recommend doing, because I think it can create some blind spots, and it just puts too much pressure on yourself that you don't need and no one expects you to accomplish.
Good advice.
What about established consultants, people that are, maybe mid-career, maybe they've been a consultant for a while, maybe they're stuck, maybe they're not sure how to really take it to that next level. What sort of, is there anything you would add to that list for people that are already in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. This group is a little bit different. You need to learn how to sell. You got to get over it. Some people say sales is a dirty word. I don't sell. I had a friend who used to say, I don't sell. I help my friends with their business problems. I just happen to be very good at making friends. This is great advice.
You're still selling.
You have to. That's how the organization that you work in survives. And it's rare for an organization to get lots of calls coming in that say, I need you. I heard about you. I need you. And, Eric, I admire you and Third Stage because you are one of the only organizations I've ever run into that can actually do that. I think Third Stage is a very special place, not just for that reason, but for other reasons. And so you have to find your voice, though. You have to figure out your style of how do you work with clients to develop new business.
Right. That's great advice. Yeah, and I agree. And it's funny you say that because I am one of those people that say I don't sell. But deep down, I know I am selling. I'm just not. I think there's a difference, though, between selling effectively and trying too hard to sell to where it's ineffective. And I think as consultants, you have to be a trusted advisor. People need to know that you're not only acting in your own self-interest of getting follow-on work or getting additional consulting work. They have to know that you're acting in their best interest, the client's best interest, and helping them. And so I always tell our consultants, if you feel like you're selling, then you're not selling well. And that's one of my favorite lines to use with our senior people. It's more of a consultative. I'm talking to you, Rob. I'm understanding your problems. And by the way, here's some ideas I have on how you might fix that problem. And oh yes, by the way, our firm, Third Stage Consulting, can help you do that. And so to me, it's like maybe it's not that I'm not selling. It's just more of a low pressure consultative sort of style of selling that for us, at least it works. I'm not saying that's right for everyone, but for us, it seems to work.
When, you use the word sales and people think of used car salesman.
Yeah.
It's not, call it whatever you want, but money has to flow into the business and somebody has to be able to get it. And if you're sincere as you're talking with the client about their problem and you believe that you have this solution, well, they're going to solve the problem. I would rather that they solved it with me and not with that guy over there.
Right.
But there seems to be this hurdle. And frankly, it is people, I think maybe they feel dirty if they do it because, well, they don't really know the technique of what you're talking about, of how to be consultative, how to work with somebody to craft a solution and knowing the nuance of timing to say, okay, well, now we're on the clock.
Yeah.
So I've got to put a letter together in order to actually, for us to pursue this together. But, you may be a hunter or a farmer. The farming right within existing accounts, are you walking the halls when at the end of the day to see who's still working and who might need help? Or are you the person who's really good at church or at your, book club or whatever to be able to chat to people a little bit about what they do and what you do? And the final thing maybe is that the number of times I've heard consulting organizations or professional services organizations somehow finally tell the client, oh, this is what we do that. And the client says, really? And you think, man, you should have been saying that 6 months ago. They don't even know what you do. The client doesn't know what you do. You're so afraid to develop the business that you're not even talking about what you're great as an organization at. And something I think to be proud of. If you're doing great work, you should be proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And I couldn't agree more. And it's almost like, you have to have that mindset of you want to be a trusted advisor. You want to help a client. Then part of helping that client is showing them what you know, showing them what you can do, showing them how you can help. And you don't have to call it, you don't call it sales, call it something else, business development, whatever you want to call it.
Business development.
Consulting, whatever. But the point is you need to be able to be effective in that selling. So I lied. I said that was my last question, but I have to ask this question because it's come up twice just here in the last couple of minutes. And given your background in AI, I have to ask this question. So I'm going to ask you two questions. I'm going to read them both and I'll kind of hone in on the second one because I think it sort of summarizes it. So this will be our last bonus question here for today. First, part A is from Subir. Subir says, consulting is tied to knowledge monetization of culture, business practices, and tangible skills, including technology. How do we see AI's impact to singularly replace that knowledge differential? And then let me read part B, which I think is maybe this might be a little bit easier to get your head around, Rob, and answer it in this way. And this is from LinkedIn, through Murugan. I'm 90% sure I butchered her name. I'm so sorry, but this is from LinkedIn. And the person says, we all know AI plays a major role in most industries. How will it impact consulting? So let's just maybe simplify it and say, how do you think AI is affecting or will affect the world of consulting now and in years to come?
Yeah. You have to kind of split it in two camps, that there are people who really dig AI. I think it's going to be the coolest thing. I think it's going to be great. Yeah, everything comes with problems. Every relationship comes with problems. Okay, put all that stuff aside for a minute. I think it's really cool. I think it's going to be very helpful. And then there are people who are just terrified of it because they feel like they're just going to be displaced. I think what you're going to see with AI in consulting is going to be around the periphery at first, meaning I sit on the board of actually an AI company that has a platform that responds to RFPs. You put an RFP into this technology, and in about 20 minutes, it has written the entire answer response without your calls and resumes. And that process used to take days, if not weeks, to do. You still have to edit it and look at it, but it's been trained to go out like ChatGPT and look at the world of RFPs and the responses, and it writes it. And it's, to me, brilliant. It's cool. And so later on, there are going to be two groups, right? There's going to be one group that's using some RFP response technology, and those who are still doing it the old-fashioned way, and it's just going to get them, it's just going to be faster. I'm going to be able to respond to that many more RFPs. I think you're going to start to see stuff similar to that with requirements. So I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to figure out what the key requirements are. And then there's going to be like everything, right? There's all of these other requirements that we know need to go into the document, but the strategic requirements are the ones that the consultant, I think, is really going to figure out. And the rest of them can be done by AI. It's just going to be, right? It's out there. All these responses are out there. I see that. I see AI being able to help me structure my thoughts if I'm going to do a client interview and what questions I should be asking, as opposed to going back and looking at, old questionnaires. I could even today, I could probably go out to ChatGPT and put that in. I'm going to do an interview on this topic. What are some great questions to ask?
Right.
I do not think, though, that AI is going to replace the consultant for a couple of reasons. One, that human interaction is necessary. Mm-hmm. It just is. People will believe me more than they will believe some document. I should have the same knowledge, but there's that personal connection, I think works. And then I also think that there's nuance, that, right, there's tone of voice, that there's body language. There are things like that only occur in kind of intimate situations where you're with clients and you're responding to what they're saying and they're responding to what you're saying. So I think we are a necessary vehicle in actually solving the problem.
Yeah, really well said. I never thought of this until you just said that, but I think what you're saying is true. I fully believe what you just said. And B, I think if anything, maybe it just changes the mix of hard versus soft skills that consultants are going to need to have, because now, the hard skills, the technical knowledge can be somewhat augmented or replaced by AI. But to your point, the human interaction, the listening, the understanding, the body language, the empathy, the human stuff, that suddenly becomes, that might become the product. That might become the consulting product now, that's now augmented by knowledge of AI. Not that you can get away with not knowing anything, because obviously you have to know how to teach AI, how to use AI, how to apply it, all that stuff. But you can maybe have less technical depth now and augment it with AI. But the emotional intelligence, the EQ, the soft skills, all the other stuff we talked about with consulting, AI is not going to fix that or automate that for us anytime soon.
Agreed.
So, well, cool. Well, very good, Rob. Well, thanks for taking a few extra minutes to answer that bonus question. And more importantly, thank you for taking the time to be here today. I know you work with a lot of different companies and you're a busy guy. I appreciate learning from you. As always, I've learned from you for 20 years now. I learned from you again here today. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new. So I appreciate you being here today and sharing your knowledge with the audience here today. How can people best learn about you, connect with you, and Blue Pasture Advisors as well?
Yeah. So you can go out to our website. It's thin because we're particular about who we work with, but it's called bluepastureadvisors.com, or you can email me at rob@bluepastureadvisors.com. We have some articles that are out there on how to transact, but Eric, I love doing this and love to have a dialogue with people about what they're working on and hearing what's going on in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've tagged you on LinkedIn too. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, just go to the show notes below, the description below. You'll see Rob tagged there, as well as his company, Blue Pasture Advisors. So you can also go there too if you want to connect with Rob on LinkedIn. So, all right, that's great stuff. Thanks again, Rob. Really appreciate having you on the show here today. A lot of good stuff. I mean, it's funny. As long as I've known Rob, I kind of feel like I've learned everything I could possibly learn from him sometimes. But then I talk to him every single time I talk to him, I learn something new. Even if it's something I thought I knew, he adds a different nuance to it or a different degree of depth and clarity to it. So a lot of interesting stuff covered in that discussion. So I hope you found it as helpful as I did. Hopefully that gives you some tips if you're looking to enter or further your career in business and technology consulting. Please let me know. What do you think? Was that a helpful conversation? And by the way, if you listen to that interview and you thought, hey, that really resonates with me, I sort of share the same values or the same principles and philosophies of how consulting should work and how you envision yourself being a consultant, I'd love to hear from you, because we're constantly looking for people on our team to help us grow our team, and we're constantly growing and scaling and adding to our team. So if you are interested in career consulting, or if you're already a consultant and you'd love to work for a company like Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech agnostic consulting firm, feel free to reach out. You can actually go to a website or to an email address called work@thirdstage-consulting.com. You can submit your info to us, your CV, cover letter, all that good stuff. And we'd love to have a chat with you. So be sure to reach out if you're interested in joining a company like Third Stage. So we're going to shift gears though, and bring on our next guest. And this is going to be Jeff Nelson, who is a he's a manager actually at Third Stage Consulting, senior level person that's been around for a long time. I've known him for several years now. He's been working with the company now for over a year here at Third Stage Consulting. And he's going to be on the show talking about keys to implementation success. So be sure to stick around, and we'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation. And you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 177. My name is Eric Kimberly, and you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this podcast is everything you need to know about digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of transformation. And in the case of this episode, we also covered career advice. So that's something that we just covered here with Rob a few moments ago. And shifting gears, though, we're going to bring on Jeff Nelson from the Third Stage Consulting team. He's someone who's been helping, he's been in the ERP space for quite some time. He's been with our company for a little over a year, and he's helped organizations through their implementations here at Third Stage in his role here. So we want to actually play you a clip from our sister podcast that hasn't launched yet. It's about to launch here soon in the month of July of 2024 here as we speak. And that new podcast is called Journey to D365. It's a podcast series, a season of 12 episodes. It's going to focus on just the Microsoft Dynamics implementation process. And so we have a number of guests on the show that will be talking about Microsoft D365, how to implement the software, et cetera, et cetera. And Jeff is one of the first guests you're going to see on that podcast when it's released. So I thought I'd play you a clip of that interview with Jeff prior to its official release on the D365 podcast, because so much of what we talk about on that show or in this interview I'm about to play you, is relevant to any sort of ERP implementation, whether it's a D365 or any other sort of enterprise technology implementation, Workday, NetSuite, SAP, Oracle Fusion, whatever it is you might be implementing. This discussion is meant to help you. And so he might use a couple terms here and there that are specific to Microsoft D365, but I want to play you this clip because it is so relevant here to the enterprise tech space. And if you are considering or in the process of implementing Microsoft D365, of course, it'll be relevant to you as well. So with that all being said, let's play the clip of my interview with Jeff Nelson talking about keys to implementation success. Before we get started and really dive into some of these questions I have for you about D365 implementations, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. Well, for the majority of my career prior to joining Third Stage, I was in the telecom infrastructure business, primarily on the wireless communication side. So I worked for a company that was building and upgrading cell towers all over the U.S. We were one of the largest at the time, working for the major cell phone carriers directly. And during my over 15 years there, I went through 2 different ERP implementations. First was an on-prem Oracle implementation in the 2009-10 timeframe. And then in 2017, we decided to go to Microsoft Dynamics D365. It was a pretty new product at that time. And so as part of that implementation, we actually looked at Third Stage to help us along that journey. And I was advocating for hiring Third Stage, and that's where you and I met. And
right.
Unfortunately, we didn't hire you, and I still think that was a big contributor to the problems that the company had with that D365 implementation, quite frankly. And as part of a spinoff of that company a few years later, we implemented D365 again in the new entity that was spun out of the original company as a new standalone business. So went through 2 D365 implementations on the client side, right? And
right.
Kept up with Third Stage and decided to try and join you guys a couple of years ago, and here I am. So
right, yeah. It worked out. Maybe it worked out for a reason then. That
maybe it all worked out. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's super interesting. Now, before I jump into my real questions here, I have to ask you a personal question real quick. You and I have known each other for a while, as you mentioned in your you have a band that you follow around and that you're a huge fan of. Can you talk a little bit about that and just share the personal story real quick?
So, coming of age in the 90s, Pearl Jam is my favorite band of all time. I've seen them 39 times, and
39.
39 times. And by the end of this summer, that number will be at least 43, as I have tickets to 4 shows on the upcoming tour. And we'll see if we can't add to that.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool. You shared some cool stories about some of the performances you've seen and some of the places you've been to see them. So I think that's pretty cool that you've done that. And us both being rock and roll and music fans, I couldn't jump into the conversation without first covering that important personal detail.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned the company you work for was the telco wireless sort of company that you worked for 15 years. You did the 2 D365 implementations there. So, obviously there's I imagine a heavy field service component to that piece of it, and managing mobile assets and that sort of thing. But is that generally the type of client that you see here at Third Stage going towards or gravitating toward D365 or implementing D365, or do you see other types of clients, or what kinds of clients are using the product most likely?
So right now I'm directly on a project with a client of ours that's in the distribution space, industrial distribution. So no field service at all, but very heavy on material planning, 11 warehouses throughout the generally Southeast United States, and lots of small parts, right? So heavy warehouse management application use there. And they're probably 3 or 4 months away from a go live, right? So we're getting very close, but that's a different type of D365 use. I've also seen completely different industry, property management, right? I've seen a couple different ones of those. One being a real estate firm, and another one being a property management company that manages rentals, long-term leases for commercial properties, and construction projects, all going to D365.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of variety in the types of companies that are using the product.
Yep.
What are some of the pros and cons of D365? And just to clarify for the audience too, and just for this conversation, when we say we're talking about D365, we're talking about the finance and operations, the F&O version of D365. But what would you say the main pros and cons of F&O are in general, with your experience both on the customer side as well as here on the consulting side?
Well, I think what could be considered a pro and a con is the high configurability of D365. There are just so many different ways the system can be configured in every conceivable module. Now that's good because, as I said, I've seen it in vastly different industries and used well, but that configuration takes time, right? And takes time and costs money on the consultant side to get you through that journey of exactly how you're going to set up the system.
Yeah. We do tell clients that a lot. I mean, it's interesting because on the software selection side of our business, when we're evaluating D365, that's one of the things that draws people to the product is how flexible it is and how open it is. But it's also a slippery slope. It seems like, just because you can configure the software doesn't always mean you should. And so, how do you differentiate between the things you should be or ought to be configuring versus the things that you're just doing it because you can, not because you should?
Yeah, exactly. And, when you get into a D365 implementation and you hear the terms are out of the box, right? That can be a bit of a misnomer because it's out of the box if I spend 10 hours configuring everything you want it to do. But yes, that's out of the box. I don't have to crack the code open to do anything different, but I do need to set up many configurations to make it work for the whatever your business process that you're describing is.
Yeah. So in other words, you don't just turn it on and it just has the industry pre-configuration already done. It's just you have the option to create the configuration. Is that
That's right.
what you're saying?
That's right. It really doesn't push you towards a best practice. It allows for many different ways to get a singular process done.
Yeah. So when you talk about the flexibility of configuration, what about the flexibility of integration? Is that another strength that you're seeing just in terms of the Microsoft open architecture and that sort of thing? How have you seen that unfold or not, with our clients and your experience?
Well, the client that I was describing that's close to go live, we have 5 or 6 different ISVs that are a part of the project that are plugged into Microsoft Dynamics. And
Wow.
I think all but one of them is really a very native plugin to where you can't tell that you're leaving a Dynamics because it's just a new menu item that's in the Dynamics menu screen.
Yeah.
So that's a really deep integration and works really well. As far as building, outside integrations that are API based or even EDI file based, we're doing some of that as well. And yes, Microsoft's highly capable of doing that, but again, because it's not pushing you one way is the only way to do it, like say an SAP might tend to do. There is a lot of work to get there, right, from the consultant side and the other software vendor who you might be bringing into the project.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. And, for those that don't know, ISV is what does it stand for? Independent software vendor. Is that what it stands for?
Yes, correct.
So an ISV, that's something that's worth noting here with Microsoft D365 is it is sort of a unique part of Microsoft's model with D365 is you have these third-party providers that use the D365 platform to tailor it or customize it for a certain industry or certain function or a certain use case that maybe the standard software doesn't do well. And so in those cases, have you said there's 6 or 7 in this case? So 6 or 7 ISVs that are you just creating different functions within D365, but they're sort of plugins or add-ons to the core product?
Correct. Like a payment processor is one. The out of the box, there's that word again, out of the box. Payment didn't work well enough for this particular client with multiple locations, multiple payment types, and multiple bank accounts. That Dynamics didn't like that. So we have a payment provider that's a part of the project. For example,
I'm here playing you a clip from an upcoming podcast interview from our Journey to D365 podcast, where I interviewed Jeff Nelson and among other guests to talk about what it takes to be successful in D365 implementations. This conversation is also relevant to any sort of ERP implementation. I've got a lot more to cover with Jeff, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say. Tell me, I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com. Check it out, and I hope to see you there. I'm here with Jeff Nelson from the Third Stage Consulting team, and we're talking about what it takes to be successful in ERP implementations. Let's continue rolling that clip of that interview. If you find a gap in the solution and you think, hey, is there an ISV out there that does, whatever the function is it hard to find, or how did this client find those 6 or 7 ISVs?
I think a combination, right? A combination of coming to me and having me do some research and plugging a gap for them, and even the main system integrator made some introductions or suggestions as well too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and speaking of system integrators and VARs, I'm going to come back to that because I have a question about just the ecosystem of Microsoft and D365 and some of the potential pitfalls there. But so you talk about flexibility of configuration of integration. What about what other advantages do you see or strengths do you see when you compare D365 to other technologies or solutions in the market? Are there other like functional or technical strengths that you see?
I think the integration to the Microsoft Office platform is really strong, and people are comfortable with it. Not only can you export to Excel, but you can actually open certain things in Excel, manipulate the data there if you want to do mass updates, and then publish that into Dynamics straight from Excel. You're not going to find that deep integration as much in other ERP systems.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. I think a
And
lot of software vendors are trying to do that, and they have some amount of integration to
yeah,
Office, but not the same way D365 does.
yeah, I don't think Microsoft will let them get quite all the way there.
Right.
Particularly in the CRM, right, with Outlook contacts and managing emails and so on and so forth. That's another, really well done integration.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. What about the user interface and just the Microsoft look and feel? How big of an advantage is that? Is it an advantage, first of all? And how do you see that affecting sort of user adoption or just ease of use and that sort of thing?
Well, I guess maybe a personal personal point of view is it doesn't feel as much of a website as some of the other um, ERP systems do. It feels like I'm more in a system and not working through a website as much. And for some people that could be a pro, and for other people that'll be a con, for sure. But I do like some of the flexibility and being able to navigate through screens, setting up your own personal views, and in some cases making those views public, right? If you get a good looking screen, and one that you've maybe added a few columns to that aren't in the quote out of the box view, and then you can publish that to let's say your customer service team if you're a customer service manager, and now you know
Right.
that everyone's working off one sheet of music.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about the downside? You talked about how the flexibility is a pro and a con, or a strength and a weakness, but are there other weaknesses of the product that you might point out just to be aware of so we can navigate those as we're implementing the solution?
Well, I don't know if this is so much a weakness of the product, but the implementations are hard,
Mm,
um, and cumbersome on the client, um, both in terms of the configurations that we talked about earlier. There's just a lot of decisions to be made, a lot of involvement that the client's going to have to get it right. That's not so much different from other systems, but in Microsoft, there are so many things you have to consider and make decisions on that the client's got to be, very keenly engaged and aware of what their SI is needing to keep the project moving.
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that flexibility piece, the dark side of flexibility, really does kind of percolate or trickle through the entire project for sure.
Yeah, I know we keep coming back to it, but I do believe it's probably the biggest pro and perhaps the biggest con of the Dynamics system.
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest advantage or business benefit of using the product, either based on your customer facing side experience or the as a consultant? Where do you see the biggest business value for companies that deploy D365?
I think it's very, very likely that you will be able to get it to configure your entire end-to-end business. Now, you might have to bring in some of the ISVs to do that, but they exist, right? They all exist. So it's quite likely you'll be able to get everything you need under one roof at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, we'll come back to that because that's a big discussion point, is the ISV slash VAR slash system integrator ecosystem
Yep.
side of it. What are some of the biggest risks then? You mentioned that it's a difficult implementation. There's a lot of decisions to be made. It puts a lot of pressure on the implementing organization to make decisions and to be engaged. What other risks do you see that are unusual or maybe a bit heightened for D365 implementations compared to others?
I would say because of the high configurability, it's even more important to get your phase zero done right, get your requirements well documented, make sure all of your business processes are documented and well understood so you can explain them to your SI. Um, don't want to avoid, you want to avoid surprises as you get further down the project. So spending that extra bit of time up front before you even look at the software, past the demo phase, spending that time getting to know your SI and making sure they understand all of your business needs and all of the different transactions that you have to go through the system to get that architecture done right up front is really important, because the risk of scope creep and project extensions and change orders becomes, that risk is extreme if you're not well defined going into the project.
Yeah. Yeah. That phase zero / implementation planning / business blueprinting process up front is really key. And that, addresses a lot of those challenges you mentioned around decision making and needing to have clarity around what you want your processes to be and what your future state's going to be, so that you can be more engaged and answer those questions more quickly. Otherwise, if you're scrambling to make the decisions as you go, it just adds a lot of time and money to the project. That we see that time and time again for projects that have struggled in their implementations. Um, how have you seen, then, coming back to this flexibility thread, then how have you seen clients navigate the need to balance the flexibility of D365 versus the potential need to want to standardize or have common business processes across their end-to-end enterprise? How do you, what's some advice you have or your observations around that with our clients?
Well, I think you don't want your system integrator to keep telling you, yeah, we can do that out of the box. They need to be asking you more questions than a simple, we can do that out of the box, we can do that out of the box. That's them leading you down a road that's going to cause problems as you get towards the, into the implementation, right? Again, that gets back to needing to define your scope of work up front.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And back to the point about out of the box not really existing. There is no such thing as out of the box. So you still have to decide, how do you want the tiniest little workflow to work? How do you want that screen to look? There's all these different things you can do that, you need to make decisions on. And if you don't, it ends up being your ISV or your VAR that makes the decisions for you, which may or may not be right.
Exactly right.
How do, what about, we talked a little bit about integration, but I want to come back to that for a moment. I'm not sure how technical you are. I don't want to turn this into a real deep dive into architecture or integration tools or things like that. But in general, how does D365, or how well does D365 integrate to, let's call it, non-Microsoft tools, not just the ISV stuff, of course, that's baked within or tied to D365 a bit more directly. But what about legacy systems that we know we're going to keep either long-term or just in the interim, or other bolt-ons that are non-Microsoft? How hard or easy is it to handle that integration between D365 and these other systems?
So you can write APIs that go out, to really anywhere, any other endpoint to exchange data. But you're writing from scratch in every case, right? There's not some sort of integration platform sitting natively in Dynamics, at least that I'm aware of. Now I have seen success with being able to do that. I've also seen success where, well, maybe we're not going to try and bring data into D365. We're just going to put it in a data lake and be able to, through a Power BI or some other visualization tool, be able to marry that data up in a dashboard type format, right? I've had quite a bit of success doing that myself from the client side, when I was in the operations into the company.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And do you find that a lot of D365 customers, and yourself as a former customer, is there a lot of integration happening typically between D365 and other systems?
Frankly, no. I not in my experience, right? again, I've seen a lot of comparative analysis, but all outside of D365, right? Take D365 data and look at it, in a visualization tool, but frankly, not in the tool itself.
All right. Thanks for being on the show, Jeff, and look forward to that podcast being released in that podcast series beginning to premiere. That'll be released in July of 2024. You can go to journey2d365.com to keep an eye out for the episodes as they're released. You'll also find them on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter X. And you'll also find them on audio-only podcast platforms as well once it's released. So be sure to stick around for that, especially if you're going through D365 implementation or if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem. You'll want to check out that podcast series, which is coming very soon. Another sister podcast that is produced by Major Tom Productions and also sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which this podcast is as well. So be sure to check that out. So if you found this information in this week's episode helpful, look forward to sharing more content with you in the coming weeks. We've got a lot of great guests coming up here on the show, so be sure to stick around. Every Wednesday, we've got new episodes. Go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to check that out. If you happen to be going through an SAP implementation, you can also check out our sister podcast called Journey to S4HANA.com. Just go to that website. You'll see all of our podcast episodes there. We just a few days ago, we completed our first full season of 15 episodes of that show. You can find that again at journey2s4hana.com. And then coming soon in just a few weeks will be journey to d365.com. And that's another sort of mini podcast series that'll be released here in just a few weeks. So hope you found this information useful. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Transformation Ground Control.